You haven't eaten since yesterday morning, but you know where the herd went. You tracked them at dawn. The prints were fresh, the wind was right, everything was lining up. Then the sky opens, not a passing shower. A slow grinding rain that soaks the ground, erases every track, and doesn't let up by nightfall, or the next morning, or the one after that. You can't hunt. The trail is gone. You can't move fast on wet rock without risking a broken ankle, and out here a broken ankle is a death sentence. The stream by your shelter is climbing, and the one thing keeping you alive, your fire, is starting to gasp under the damp air. You're not bored, you're trapped. For almost all of human history, a week of rain wasn't an inconvenience. It was one of the most dangerous stretches a person could live through. And what people did during that danger may have shaped human civilization more than almost anything they did on a clear day. Today, rain means a blanket and a show. For someone thousands of years ago, that exact same sound outside could kill them 3 separate ways before it ever stopped. Threat 1 is cold. Water pulls heat off skin roughly 25 times faster than dry air does, source 1. Without waterproof shelter or real clothing, a long soaking in anything below room temperature can drag a body toward hypothermia in hours. And most places our ancestors lived got that cold at night, even in parts of Africa during the wet season. Threat 2 is flooding. Caves and rock shelters, the main places people lived, sit low near rivers or hillsides for a reason: water. Archaeologists have found thick flood sediment layers inside occupied caves, meaning the water came in while people were living there. Some of those layers mark the last time a cave was ever used again. Threat 3, the worst one: predators. Rain pushes animals toward shelter too. Sometimes that shelter is the same cave. At sites in South Africa, researchers have found human remains and big cat remains in the very same layer, and some human skulls show puncture marks that match leopard teeth. Rain didn't just make life uncomfortable, it compressed predator, prey, and human into the same small dry space at the same time. In the middle of all that, one job outranked everything else: keep the fire alive. The oldest solid evidence of hominins using fire comes from Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, dated to roughly 1 million years ago, though a newer 2026 study using a fresh bone analysis method suggests it might go back even further, possibly close to 1.8 million years, a claim that's still being tested, source 3, source 4. But controlling a fire someone already has and making one from nothing are 2 different skills, and for most of human history, most people probably couldn't do the second one reliably. The clearest evidence we have of people repeatedly and habitually rebuilding fire in the exact same spot, a real reused hearth, comes from Kesem Cave near Kafr Qasim in central Israel, dated to roughly 300,000 to 400,000 years ago, source 5, source 6. So if your fire went out, you might not get it back. Some groups carried a live ember instead, wrapped in green leaves or packed into a chunk of tinder fungus that could smolder for hours. A biological lighter. We know this wasn't guesswork because we found the kit. When Otzi the Iceman, a 5,000-year-old mummy preserved in the Alps, was pulled out of the ice, his belt pouch held flint, iron pyrite for striking sparks, and tinder fungus to catch them, source 7, source 8. 5,000 years after fire was figured out, people were still terrified enough of losing it to carry backup equipment on their body. So when the rain came, the fire came first. Move it deeper in, shield it, feed it, not too much, not too little. Dry inner wood split from wet logs, birch bark, which contains compounds that let it catch even when damp. For hours, someone's entire job might just be sitting by that fire, keeping it alive, because that fire was warmth, safety, cooked food, and the center of every conversation the group had. So the fire's holding, you're dryish, but you can't leave. What do you actually do for days? You make things. The archaeological record is packed with proof of exactly that. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, archaeologists found a genuine ochre processing workshop dated to about 100,000 years ago. Abalone shells used as mixing bowls, grindstones, hammerstones, all for producing pigment, source 9. Someone sat there in weather we'll never know and ran a small production line. Bone needles start showing up around 61,000 years ago at Sibidu Cave, South Africa, source 10. Delicate tools with a drilled eye. You don't carve something that fine while you're running. You carve it while you're sitting still with hours to spare. And here's a genuine surprise. The oldest known rope in the world wasn't made by modern humans at all. At Abri-du-Maras in France, archaeologists found a twisted 3-ply cord made by Neanderthals, dated to somewhere between 41,000 and 52,000 years ago, source 11. Making cordage takes patience, repetition, and free time. The exact combination a multi-day storm hands you for free. And rope changes everything downstream of it. Better shelters, snares, bindings, bags. Someone even built a machine for it. At Hohlfels Cave in Germany, archaeologists pieced together a carved mammoth ivory tool with 4 spiral-grooved holes, dated to 35,000 to 40,000 years old. When researchers rebuilt it and tested it, it took a small team just minutes to produce several meters of rope, source 12, source 13. Someone carved a dedicated rope-making tool. That's not survival improvisation, that's engineering. And people weren't just making tools, they were making shelter livable. At Sibidu Cave, archaeologists found layered bedding, sedges, rushes, and grasses, dated to about 77,000 years ago, topped with leaves that contain natural insect-repelling compounds, source 14, source 15. And more recently at Border Cave, similar bedding was dated back even further, to roughly 200,000 years ago, currently the oldest known example, source 16. The bedding wasn't just laid down once, it was burned and replaced over and over, early pest control. But here's the part almost nobody expects, because all of that, the tools, the rope, the bedding, that's the practical stuff. What people did beyond that is something else. They made art. Chauvet Cave in France holds paintings commonly dated to around 32,000 to 37,000 years old. Lions, horses, rhinos, drawn with an understanding of anatomy and motion that still stops people in their tracks, source 17. But Chauvet isn't even the oldest anymore. On the island of Sulawesi in Indonesia, researchers have dated cave art, including a full narrative scene, to at least 51,200 years old, making it currently the oldest confidently dated figurative art we know of anywhere on Earth. Source 18, source 19. And here's the detail that matters. These paintings usually aren't near the entrance, where you'd naturally shelter from the weather. They're deep inside, through narrow passages, in chambers you'd have to crawl to reach. Someone carried a fat-fueled lamp into total darkness on purpose. Nobody does that when the hunting is good and the weather's clear. We can't prove these paintings happened specifically because people were stuck inside. That link is our inference, not a documented fact. But the logic holds. This is exactly the kind of concentrated, patient, unhurried behavior a long stretch of forced downtime produces. And rain may not have just produced art. It may have helped produce culture itself. Picture 15 to 30 people stuck together for days with nothing to do. You talk. In 2014, anthropologist Polly Wiesner published a study comparing daytime and nighttime firelit conversations among the Jew/Hwansi Bushmen of the Kalahari. Daytime talk leaned practical, resources, complaints, logistics. Firelit talk shifted noticeably toward stories, social bonding, and imagination. Source 20, Source 21. The fire itself seemed to change what people were willing to say to each other, and some of what got passed down that way appears to have lasted an extraordinarily long time. A 2015 study matched 21 Australian Aboriginal coastal stories describing the sea-swallowing land against real, independently measured sea level data and found the stories plausibly describe events from over 7,000 years ago, source 22, source 23. It's worth saying clearly, this claim is genuinely disputed. Some researchers argue oral tradition simply can't be verified as staying that stable for that long, given centuries of outside contact and cultural change, source 24. But even the possibility says something about how seriously small groups can guard a story, generation after generation, mostly around a fire. But rain wasn't only the villain here. After heavy rain, ground turns soft, and soft ground holds deep, clear tracks. Some of the best tracking conditions on Earth show up right after a storm breaks. Rain also fills natural rock basins with drinkable water, and a wet period changes the food supply rather than shutting it down. Mushrooms, tubers, insects, all easier to find. Termite swarms after rain, still eaten today in parts of East Africa, are protein-dense and require no tools at all, just showing up. The groups who understood those shifts had a real advantage over the ones who didn't. So, what did people actually do during a week of rain? Everything that mattered later. They kept the fire alive. They shaped tools for the next hunt. They twisted the rope that held their shelters together. They ground the pigment that ended up on a cave wall 100 feet underground. They told the stories that carried real testable knowledge forward for thousands of years. And when the rain finally broke, they stepped outside onto soft, perfect ground and got back to work. Every tool, every rope, every painted animal on a cave wall, a huge share of it traces back to downtime. Hours nobody could spend outside, spent instead on whatever a person could build with their hands and a fire. Boredom for them wasn't empty time, it was raw material,